We're here to idea everyone, to fire up your curiosity and connect you with the people and ideas that shape our world. Watch, listen, understand, connect, create. Let's move the human story forward together.
Hello and welcome to The Poetry of Science, a podcast which provides insight into new scientific research via the medium of poetry. I'm your host, Dr. Sam Illingworth, and each week I'll be introducing you to some of the latest scientific findings and sharing a selection of science-themed poetry. After all, we could all do with a little bit more poetry in our lives. In this episode, I'll be exploring new research which has found that 5 years after the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, 1 in 4 residents has PTSD. Liquid life seeps underground, flowing from mouth to mouth in filthy, unfit pipes that leach and bleed and take. Municipal sins spoiling the purity of water's rituals, spreading death, disease, despair. Sodden wounds that worsen in time, draining all mouths of life and health and hope. This poem is inspired by recent research published in the JAMA network, which has found that there is a prevalence of depression and post-traumatic stress disorder in Flint, Michigan, 5 years after the onset of the water crisis. The Flint water crisis was a human-made public health crisis that began in April 2014, when Flint, Michigan switched its water supply from Lake Huron in the Detroit River to the more corrosive Flint River. In doing so, the authorities failed to properly treat the water supply to prevent lead and other elements from leaching out of the city's old water pipes. As a result, tens of thousands of Flint residents were exposed to dangerous levels of lead, and outbreaks of Legionnaire disease killed at least 12 people and sickened dozens more. Flint drinking water was not declared lead-free until January 2017. In this new study, researchers surveyed almost 2,000 adults who were living in Flint, Michigan during the crisis, asking them about their experiences, their psychological symptoms 5 years later, and their access to and use of mental health services during this period. The results of the analysis indicate that 1 in 5 adults were estimated to have clinical depression, and 1 in 4 were estimated to have PTSD 5 years after the water crisis began. These rates are 3 to 5 times greater than national estimates among US adults overall, highlighting how environmental disasters such as the Flint water crisis have long-lasting psychological effects that likely require expanded mental health services to help deal with them. Now that you've heard the science, let me read the poem to you again. Liquid life seeps underground, flowing from mouth to mouth in filthy, unfit pipes that leach and bleed and take. Municipal sins spoiling the purity of water's rituals, spreading death, disease, despair. Sodden wounds that worsen in time, draining all mouths of life and health and hope. In this section of the podcast, I'd like to share a poem written by another poet on a topic related to the science that has been discussed so far. In this episode, I'll be reading Water Table by Eliza Griswold. Eliza Griswold is an American journalist and poet who was born in 1973. Griswold graduated from Princeton University in 1995 and then studied creative writing at Johns Hopkins University. As well as being a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, her poetry has appeared in The New Yorker, The Atlantic, The New York Times Magazine, and Poetry Magazine. She has written and translated 4 books of non-fiction and poetry and has been awarded various prizes, including the J. Anthony Lucas Prize, a Penn Translation Prize, and the Rome Prize for her poetry. Water Table by Eliza Griswold. My earliest wish was not to exist, to burst in the backyard without violence, no blood, no fleshy bits, mute but impressed, alone behind the rectory where no one would see me. This wasn't a plea to be found or mourned for, but to be unborn into the atmosphere, to hang in the humid air as ponds vent upward from the overheated earth, rise until they freeze and crystallize, then drop into the aquifer. Thank you for listening to the Poetry of Science.
Thank you very much for being with us for this episode of the ideaXme Show. ideaXme is a global platform. Our mission is to move the human story forward by sharing knowledge of the future. You can find us on all major audio networks at www.radioideaXme.com, on YouTube and Vimeo. Please subscribe.